There's something about the planes I can't quite put my finger on that I don't. Oh, wait a minute. Hello and welcome to Vision Denial. My name is Sam and this is just Vision Denial. I'm putting this under World Watch. It makes more sense. If you're new here, I've watched every single playoff game of all qualifying regions. Yes, including that one, and I'm still covering as well on my TikTok, of which I'll link down below, every single series that is happening at Worlds. Every match, all of them. Play-ins have just finished. What an incredible situation. I do think play-ins was a lot of fun. There were a lot of good games, and a bunch of the stuff that I was suspecting came true, and some of the other stuff did not. Pretty sure most people's pick'ems and crystal balls were completely shattered this weekend. That said, let's go over some of the different stuff that we're going to be covering, including the teams that have been disqualified. We say goodbye to many regions. The only other region that has stayed that is not the big four is Vietnam, which is solid for Vietnam, but also a little saddening for the PCS. And a brief overview of my thoughts about how play-ins as a system is this year compared to others, as well as just hoping what can be fixed for next year as we head in also to our predictions for the Swiss stage. So without further ado, let's take a look first at the breakdown and series that I've watched throughout. And we're back with the Worlds qualifying series, the last playoff / best of 5 for Worlds. We got North America's Golden Guardians versus EMEA's or Europe's Team BDS. And congrats on Team BDS for being the 22nd and last team to qualify for Worlds. And what a world of a difference from this team. Granted, both teams played a little differently than expected in some sense. Golden Guardians, for their part, were, still pretty gold focused with their approach. They, however, overestimated their strengths and ability to execute on some of their drafts that were a lot harder to play against a team that is more than happy to scale the games out, not playing at a fast enough pace. While BDS, who usually play around said scaling and waiting things out, especially around Drakes and neutrals, really held up the early game fabulously, making this a really strong indicator that they understood where their actual priorities should lie. Because they had stronger vision overall, cleaner coordination, significantly better macros, and also keeping to their regular neutral objective strengths and scaling front-to-back drafts. Now, my question is, was this an improvement from Team BDS or much more of Golden Guardians dropping off the ball, which is something that they had been doing the entire playoff, or maybe a combo of the both? We'll see. My MVP for this series is Sheo, who created the space and enabled his solo leaders to shut down Golden Guardians' plans. And we're back with the first series in Worlds and play-ins. We got ourselves the Latin American representatives, Movistar R7 or Rainbow 7 versus the first seed from the PCS, Paris Saint-Germain Talons. And quite honestly, Rainbow 7 had a solid showing in the first game, but given they couldn't control the tempo and didn't push their advantages, it was a matter of time before the Talons got into their groove of things. Now, because both teams in the first game showed some solid approach to vision, neutral, coordination, and macro choices overall, it was really whether or not how the second game would go, but, reset, game 2, and it looked like the Talons were just testing the waters and ready to take things seriously. The gap in macro choices, vision, coordination, and tempo was just clear. The Talons are a terrifying team for the play-ins, and that is no surprise. Now, I do think that the Talons will get caught eventually by their over-aggression and lack of patience, But at the moments, for the moment right now, it's looking really good from them. My MVP of the series is Aja, who played just his play alone made the series feel like they were playing 5v4 against Rainbow Seven. And we're back with play-ins, or first day at Worlds play-ins second series. We got the VCS's Vietnam's first seed GAM Esports versus the Brazilian CBLOL representatives Loud. And oh boy. Now, frankly put, GAM was just caught unprepared for this series. They held weaker vision, moments where their coordination was just outright non-existent, and their macro choices were predictable, if not sometimes baffling. GAM as a powerhouse did not show up today, and instead just underestimated Loud, who played solidly from either their clean vision and solid neutral approaches, incredible coordination and individual play, and a strong understanding of their win conditions and approaches. There was something magical to how well prepared Loud was in this series. Now, I do find myself concerned about their stubbornness and how they would keep trying to play regularly over and over again. But as far as this series goes, it was great to see Loud catch the repeating angles that GAM were trying to bring and then break their defensive plays. My MVP of the series goes to Route, who, not just for the first day pentakill, but also his presence throughout each team fight being so consistent. And we're back with the second day of Worlds and play-ins. We got the Japanese LJL representatives Detonation FocusMe versus the second seed from the PCS CTBC Flying Oysters. And I'm gonna be real here. Why the heck is Appamen here? Like, the coordination that looked so good from Detonation during summer and summer playoffs is just gone from this series, as the team puts so little attention to him. Now, to be frank, the core four are fine if you can tell their coordination is intact there, but please bring Milan back. Now, as for the Flying Oysters, even if DFM had Milan and their regular summer roster, the actual play from the Flying Oysters would likely still be the same. Just as strong and even more consistent than I've seen them in a while. It's good to acknowledge that this series wasn't just a stomp on a team who was playing weaker, it's in fact improved showing around vision, neutrals, coordination, macro approach. The Flying Oysters are really showing a strong first series. My MVP of this series is Gemini, who really put into practice getting his team's win conditions while nullifying Detonation FocusMe's. And we're back with play-ins day 2, second series. We got ourselves the fourth seed from the LEC, Team BDS, versus the second seed from the Vietnamese VCS team, Wales. And quite frankly, super weird, right? But granted, what a series with both great accomplishments and severe concerns. For one, BDS needs to actually play with more respect from here on out. Their first game showed that how they play around Adam and how that can work in some sense, but taking that away with the same kind of cockiness still there towards the drafting and the decisions becomes a little bit more baffling. Meanwhile, Team Wales played with such patience and coordination and resolve and adaptation that it becomes worrisome to see how much time they spend to end games and pull in around neutrals to keep things going. Because both teams have incredible vision, coordination, neutral setups, but Team Wales is too cautious and BDS is not cautious enough, all while having some weird approach to tempo. This side of the bracket could go either way, but frankly, this is not enough to convince that either of these teams will escape play-ins. My MVP of this series is Artemis for his stellar team fighting and positioning during this whole series. And we're back with play-ins day 3. We got ourselves Loud from Brazil versus Paris Saint-Germain Talons from the PCS Seed 1. And look, Loud put up such a strong fight with clear understanding of their win conditions, incredible vision, solid neutral approach, and coordination to back it up. But there comes a point where the lack of proactivity will cause issues, and that's what happened with this series. The Talons held all the cards, either in regards of tempo, pressure, neutrals, and so on. And the Talons were first to every play and dictated exactly how both games are going to go. Now, if that was everything, it could still be pretty close, which is why the efficiency in which the Talons are playing is to be really hammered in here. This team is terrifying. Moments where bad habits reared their head, but this particular Talons took their fundamentals, their coordination, and dialed it up to the mostly clean series overall. My MVP of this series is Gen.G, who held such incredible pressure all series long. And we're back with day 3 of the play-ins. We got ourselves second seed from the PCS CTBC Flying Oysters versus the second seed of the VCS in Vietnam, Team Wales. And honestly, okay. The more that Team Wales play, the better they get. But there really has to be an upper limit here. The Flying Oysters, for their part, have shown so much good play, especially within the early game. Between their proactivity, high pace, great vision, and solid coordination, we get a team that looked unstoppable. And then the late game rolls around, and we have a disjointed, confused team in need of proper shot calling that doesn't seem to exist. They slow down too much. They have a chance to make redemption, but this is not a great look for them. While Team Wales have been played, the first 2 games in ways that are very unconvincing of their tenure, which really shouldn't be the norm. Because at their peak, in the late game, with full information, they are terrifying to face off. The coordination is there, map leap is commonplace, and neutrals are properly set up. So what happened to Team Wales? Why does it take so long to get going? Because at some point, a team won't let you get that improvement over time. My MVP of this series is Artemis for the consistency of his play and positioning in team fights. And we're back with play-ins day 4. Movistar R7 from the Latin Americans LLA versus GAM Esports Vietnamese VCS's seed number 1. And boy, this is the GAM we all know and love. Now, Rainbow 7 put up one hell of a fight, in which, from draft to win condition understanding, there is a little bit of a disconnect. On the one hand, they play a solid front-to-back style intended to work with neutral setups, but they don't draft for that play style. They draft for side lane control and continuous backline access with their vision control, and we never get that. Instead, GAM was able to play their side lane in an unfiltered way, garnering some impressive performances around neutrals and side lane pressure. The issue for me here is how the vision continues to be inconsistent from the side of GAM, and how they don't keep consistent proactivity throughout this series. Much of their leads are off the back of Rainbow 7 making rather large mistakes, but GAM do take them, balloon them in very solid ways, and are relieving some of the concerns hovering over their heads regarding their performance for now. My MVP of the series is Catty for how he manipulated his skirmishes in his team's favor. And we're back with play-ins day 4. Detonation FocusMe from the LJL in Japan versus Team BDS, the 4th seed of the LEC in EMEA. And just quite frankly, this result is just the baseline expectation that we should have for BDS. And they pulled it off pretty well. From draft to proactivity, coordination, all of it, excellent. This was night and day and just the start to convince everyone they have what it takes to get out of play-ins. Meanwhile, DFM, who have had much better international performances in the past, are plagued by the sadness of their underperforming top laners again this year. And while much of their woes aren't wholly to blame on Appaman, his presence made the entire play much, much more difficult for them. I really would have rathered to see Udapon topside in Milan bot, and I don't see why they couldn't have, but alas, too little, too late. And DFM come out with such a disappointing performance that isn't even worth comparing to their summer, regular season, and playoff selves. My MVP for this series is Crowny for his incredible team fighting prowess across the series. And we're back with Day 4 of the play-ins round from the CBLOL representatives versus the first seed from the VCS GAM Esports as a rematch. And GAM is back in form. Now, Loud for their part held such strong early game approach, some strong vision, with incredible pace to it all. But by the time they came to the mid and late game, they did not properly transition any of their leads. They slowed down their pace to a degree that is not a little baffling and gave GAM so much space that it is a significant issue within this series. At this point, Loud have shown how incredible they are as a squad, but it is not enough to pull through. While GAM have shown a large amount of resilience and patience during this series, there's a point in which, with decent enough vision, all the map pressure, and knowledge of their opponents, GAM would just wait out for the play, and they knew what would create the best space opposed to just, brute forcing it. But the lack of proactivity and control of the pace is still a significant issue that hopefully is corrected come the time to rematch the Vietnamese finals. My MVP of this series is Katsi, who had such strong influence during these skirmishes. It was beautiful to watch. And we're back with play-ins Day 4. The second seed from the Southeast Asian PCS, CTBC Flying Oysters, versus the fourth seed of EMEA's LEC Team BDS. And, quite frankly, BDS are showing us the caliber of team we expected them to be from the start. Now, the Flying Oysters, for their part, properly answered the weaknesses that BDS showed us today, taking into account the overextensions, all while keeping up with vision, neutral setups, and great coordinations. But when looking at their proactivity and how they balloon leads, it's just frankly not there. If you do nothing with the goal, what's the point? BDS, for their part, show great adaptability, coordination, and understanding of their win conditions, but we still hold moments where they fumble rather hard and either look lost or actively slow the pace of the game down to a wild degree. Now, if BDS want to move forward, there can't be any goofing around, or you'll find yourself in a rather precarious position, especially facing off the top-seeded PCS representatives, who are a very different kind of beast. My MVP of the series is Crowny for his consistent presence during the team fights. And we're back with play-ins Day 5, the first of the best of 5 qualifiers. We've got ourselves Team Wells of the Vietnamese regions, seed number 2, versus GAM Esports of the Vietnamese region, seed number 1. It's a rematch of the grand finals, and as such, it is the same result. So congratulations to GAM on following through to the Swiss stage. Fantastic series all around, but still the likely expectation. Team Wales are a team mired in inconsistency for their quality, their vision, coordination, macro choices, and pretty much all other fundamentals. From one game looking fantastic to the next looking very weak. But they did show us limitations that can come from GAM. Speaking of, honestly, this wasn't the most confident showing from this team as they head to the Swiss stage. For their vision is incredible, but the approach to neutrals, macro choices, and how they opted into certain skirmishes that they had no business winning to begin with just leaves me with plenty of questions. Like, for starters, what happens when you face a team that holds early game either equal or stronger than Team Wales and who don't throw away their leads. It's just a matter of looking of just the situation and wondering how much does GAM give up before the deficits are too big to come back from. We'll get to see in the Swiss stage. My MVP for the series is Katsi, whose presence and zoning shaped the pace of the series incredibly. And we're back with day 5 of the play-ins, the second Swiss stage qualifications. The first seed from the PCS in Southeast Asia, Paris Saint-Germain Talons, with the fourth seed from the LEC, EMEA, Team BDS, in a reverse sweep. Congratulations to Team BDS. It was quite a series, and frankly, a little sad that we had to say goodbye to either of these teams, regardless of the result. The Talons bring a level of coordination to the game that is something to behold. Some strong vision, good control of the pace, and an understanding of their win conditions that is just fantastic. Now, some problems arise while they are pushed to their limits with how much they slow down, hesitate, and panic. Now, Team BDS knew exactly how to get to that point, but not without some growing issues of their own. They have a strong sense of coordination, incredible approach to neutrals, and fantastic creativity to back it up, but once they fall behind, they have this solemn look to them, leading to a very rough time trying to come back or claw any leads. They do not play well from behind. Now that said, once ahead, their play is solid but not consistent, leading to the bizarre nervousness that could be felt throughout the series. BDS have a long way to go to convince people that they'll get past the Swiss stage, but this is still an incredible start. My MVP of the series is Lavrov for the space and engage opportunities he created for his team. Well, holy smokes. I honestly, every single one of these series were a delight to watch. I do not think that I have a disappointment. Outside of possibly just for my personal pick'ems, the BDS versus PSG, I did not like the fact that it was one of those two teams that had to go. Both of those teams going through probably would have made the best case scenario for the play-ins teams because we only could have two. But my thought primarily from this is the gap that people once thought existed with all the teams that are relegated to the play-ins every time, the emerging regions, the gap is indeed closing. That particular gap with NA and EU, for the most part, because the usual discussion of the gap is like NA EU versus like China Korea, and that gap, whether or not it is closing or if that's a discussion that needs anything versus consistency, because I don't think that gap is that big. Just that there's a lack of consistency. But more specifically, there was a very clear gap that existed between the CBLOL, the LLA, LJL, the VCS, and most of the other larger regions. And this play-in specifically, I think, dispels the notion that there is a gap, so to speak. Because, quite honestly, even just with GAM having lost to the CBLOL but still qualifying, Team Wales having done so incredibly well against everybody within their particular group, including beating BDS, who went through anyways. Like, if we're going to just go like results-based analysis and everything else, that alone should be convincing for many of you. But even on like a stats-based like play level, looking at how they played, holy smokes, these teams brought it. Some more than others, evidently, on the situation. I think that Detonation really dropped the ball, even though we know for a fact that they can and should have been able to, perform. But we'll talk about that with the one-to-one breakdown. Same with like Movistar R7, who I don't think had quite enough in like the tank to pull off what they wanted to do. But God, Loud, fantastic. The Vietnamese teams, I think, coming back into form with a little bit of a rust to them at the start. Chef's kiss. All around fantastic time. So let's actually talk about a breakdown of some of these teams. Starting with primarily with Detonation FocusMe, who we say goodbye to within Worlds. I am saddened in a particular sense. There was a sense of excitement after their disappointing performance going into MSI, in which that particular play in stage of MSI they were not able to deliver with a very similar, if not almost downright exact format. Why Opperman? Because when you and I checked to see if there's anything here that would have changed this particular scenario, they showed that Milan was going to be part of the roster. Milan was in the official announcement of when they went to Worlds. They even announced that Opperman was going to be there. And the biggest thing here, right, because Udapon straight up outperformed everybody in the top lane in the LJL. If people didn't know, Udapon is a fucking menace when it comes to that particular scenario. And so it really disappointed me to see that the bulk of this issue was Opperman could not perform, leaving very large amounts of limitation for Detonation FocusMe to create the spaces and plays that would have made them successful. Because their 4-man squad coordination was fantastic. They were not falling behind in any particular sense. But every other game, they just faltered. And I wonder what would have been if they had not switched out Milan. We say goodbye to the LLA representatives, Movistar R7 or Rainbow 7, who throughout the years, if you followed them at all, my God, the improvement is so well felt. In this particular play-ins, though, where there is very strong sense of coordination, they very much understand their fundamentals and how to approach things. There is a disconnect for how they should have been playing and approaching much of the different teams. They would draft a lot more complicated scenarios and win conditions that did not match the inherent play that was at hand. And I've mentioned this previously in a lot of these particular series, that Rainbow 7 played front to back with non-front to back drafts. And whether or not that would have contributed to more guaranteed wins or even any extra win at all, it is also mentioned that the teams they faced were the Talons, who are by and far one of the most well-coordinated teams within the play-ins, and then GAM, who moved on, who, after a little bit of rust, were relentless. And the lack of ability to create a draft that would have suited their actual playstyle makes it harder to actually contend with some of the teams that they had to face, which is unfortunate, but kind of the reality and limitations of Rainbow 7's specific kind of playstyle. But hopefully they buck up, and next year we'll see a much stronger team. And we say goodbye to the CBLOL representatives in Loud. And honestly, it is saddening to see this team go, because holy smokes, are they ever incredible. They go off against GAM twice, right? After losing to PSG and then losing to GAM. Again, like mentioned with Rainbow 7, two of the most relentless teams to go. Loud still showed an impressive feat. This is a team that shows that the CBLOL as a whole has stepped up a lot, because this isn't also like a team that was in a region that was like, oh, we have stomped them. Loud is not from that kind of caliber of a team. In fact, they worked to get to here. And with this kind of performance, holy smokes, I cannot wait to see what happens next year with this team, because it will not surprise me if somehow, if not Loud, but whoever they send as the CBLOL representative will do work. Their coordination, their planning, their preparation especially. They totally understood what was needed to actually contest with these teams. And it is such a pleasure to watch them play and a sadness to see them go so soon. And we say goodbye to the second-seeded Vietnamese representatives of the VCS team, Wales. And if you followed my perspective of them and my reviews of them all across the playoffs, the word here was consistent and gradual improvement. For the longest time, their play was not good. They really needed the momentum and ball to roll to really get to a point where they were able to finally qualify against Team Secret. This was not at all the expected matchup. And for them to come out swinging, beating BDS right off the gate, and then working all the way to like top seed before doing the rematch versus GAM, I think it was just unfortunate nature that they were to face GAM, because there is something in my mind that thinks that given the progress and momentum that they had going, possibly they could have made it to the Swiss stage. Now, we have to bolster some like reality and expectations here. Giving up game one so many times means that there was going to be a limitation to how far they could go. There is an understanding towards this team that they take a little bit too long to really get their momentum going. Because as cool as that was to witness on a long-term scale, on a match-to-match scale is not a good look. But this is a fantastic showing from a Vietnamese representatives, especially after a dry spell and a slight disappointment from most recent memory of the performances of last year's Worlds and this year's MSI. We say goodbye also to the second-seeded PCS, or Southeast Asian representatives, the CTBC Flying Oysters. God, their name is so cool. Of which also a representative that came out swinging. It is a disappointment, sadly, because the Flying Oysters was another one of those teams that did a lot of gradual improvements from their playoffs to qualification, and then showed that improvement in spades. Now, I do think that the conditions in which who they had to face off of Team Wales and BDS were unfortunate. They had shown that they were not quite a team who, honestly, and if I was to quote my wording to be specific here, they properly answer weaknesses, but hold very little proactivity. And that's the biggest issue here. Lack of proactivity. Does not couple well with any other preparation you have. If your whole setup is scaling and just waiting for mistakes, it does not bode well. But this is an incredible team who has done such drastic improvements that it will not surprise me to see them more often. They've been already a positive and beautiful mainstay of the PCS. It is just a matter of time to see whether or not they usurp eventually the Talons. And we say goodbye to the top seed of the first seed of the PCS in Southeast Asia, Paris Saint-Germain Talon, of which also I think is a far cry, saddening departure towards Worlds, because this is by far, I think, the most well-coordinated team of play-ins. They showed that throughout play-ins. They showed that through their own playoffs. And the matchup that they held of BDS was one of which BDS well understood that disruption was needed to really get the ball going for them. And I mention this because momentum matters in the play-ins. And the Talons had the momentum. They were in a consistently solid position. Non-stop wins throughout the bar. They faced off against stronger odds, or against harsher odds before, and it was so close. The margins were so close for them to really man, like so many what ifs, just so many what ifs. And I don't. This is never going to be the last that we see them. This has become like a mainstay representatives of the PCS, and with constant improvements, nonetheless. They keep bringing in the right kinds of members to switch things up just enough for them to keep their style whilst improving consistently. And I cannot wait to see what happens next year with them. Up next, we have to set ourselves expectations for the Swiss stage. Now, this is completely new in terms of a format. It is hard to speculate where people are going to end up because you could end up seeded against like the top four or like three of the top four in your first three matches and get eliminated, but have been a top 8 team overall, which is a fact of the situation that we have to be aware of going into the Swiss stage. Given that particular knowledge, it is hard for me to look at the Swiss stage and look and see, yes, a North American team is going to make it through. They're not. I'm just going to put it out there right now. You should not be expecting any North American team to go through. Less of that, you should not be expecting the likes of Mad Lions or Team BDS to make it through. Team BDS look fantastic currently. Adam is doing a lot of work, but the problem here is that Adam is not the best top laner going into the Swiss stage, and his shenanigans are not going to pull through as well given, I don't know, 369, the Shy, just to name off a couple of them. And even then, the Shy and Weibo Gaming, I don't even expect is going to make it through either. The teams that I expect from any of these, and I will include, again, my pick'ems in the comments, or not in the comments, but in the description below. I expect Gen.G and JDG, who are the top two front runners in my mind for this particular go. LNG closely behind because LNG is terrifying. BLG has been a consistent main factor, even if their playoffs have been less than ideal. T1 is always going to have a Worlds buff. People should be expecting T1 to perform significantly. G2, also fantastic at performing at Worlds. And I think the one that's going to surprise many is Fnatic. Fnatic has been on the rise, a constant improvement, and despite how their entire year has went and how their summer had looked less than ideal, you cannot look at the playoff performances as an isolation of, this was kind of a happenstance situation. No, this is a consistent effort of improvement, and momentum, again, matters when it comes to the long-term prospect of what we should be expecting in the Swiss stage. The play-ins teams will have a distinct advantage of having played on stage first, but I'm going to be realistic here. I don't see GAM making it past a couple of wins, maybe, if against some North American teams and even against some of the lower-seeded European teams, but it is not a strong prospect to believe that the lower-seeded European teams, that GAM, or that the North American teams are going to make it far given this format, especially since they'll have a lot more teams to contend with that, not on like an objective factor, because this is a game in which the patch changes, teams adapt in different ways, and things can like go off in a different particular perspectives, but even with the stats that I have or that I've looked in, as well as my notes and the different playoff performances, they aren't quite up to snuff compared to the likes of Gen.G, the most consistent team going in here. Second most consistent behind JD Gaming, who is terrifying, the front runners to win the whole tournament. T1, again, a terrifying team who's also playing off of a swing of momentum and improvement. LNG, same thing, a swing of momentum improvement, and is equally terrifying to JDG. G2 in and of itself is a wildcard team we should be expecting huge strides from. Even the gap of like their highest highs to lowest lows, they're more towards their highest highs in a scary degree. And BLG, who even within their lackluster performance of playoff, their lackluster performance in playoff netted them third against LNG and JDG, who they pushed still to the brink. This is not a situation in which you can look at this and go, yes, these teams should be evaluated equally, because no, their performances enact and show distinctly there is a significant difference between, there is like a significant gap still in terms of the individual performance. Not necessarily a regional gap, but an individual gap of some of these teams, because D plus within Korea, big gap. Cannot perform. Not going to happen. Weibo, same deal. Will not do. It would not surprise me if D plus and Weibo lose to some North American teams. That would not faze me whatsoever. But those are my thoughts, at least within the expectations of who should be going through within the Swiss stage. And these expectations should be put with a grain of salt, because the Swiss stage itself is designed to make it that every game matters and is tense, but that the seeding itself is a lot more random and less well organized and less filtered for expected wins than what their regular group stages would be. You could be a top 4 team and face off the top 3 teams that will go through Worlds, like through the bracket stage anyways. So, overall, what have been my major thoughts within play-ins and after my expectations of Swiss stage is that play-ins was fun, but I cannot help but be mired in disappointment of some sort. As I've mentioned within MSI, the weakest teams of play-ins only got to play 2 best of 3s, of which they still only played 4 games. And I wanted to know why this bothered me so much, because if they played 4 games but they played more regional matchups, then that would have been fine, right? I looked through the past in terms of all of the different play-in stages that we've had, and the play-in stages of pre-2020 had the similar issue, but with less of the chances of like redemption arcs, so to speak, but virtually still the same kind of result. 2 regional matchups, 4 games. And it was a guaranteed 4 games, maybe a tiebreaker on the situations. It felt effectively like the best of 3 format that we have here. The difference is that they could have up to 6 games within this particular format. And I went, okay, so if the number of games is not quite the biggest issue here, then what's going on? And then I looked at the format from 2020 to 2022. And people might not realize this, but that format in 2020 and 2021 especially included groups of 6 teams. I'm just remembering this correctly because I don't want to look like an ass. Group 1. It was, in 2021. Yeah, 2021. Or not in 2020. It was 2022. God. But I know there was a play-ins here that, yeah, here we go. It's the play-in stages of 2022. This play-in stage was hype. And it wasn't the best of 3 format, but do you remember how many international matchups DRX had to go through? They went through the most of them through play-ins. They faced off against 2, 3, 4, 5 regions. Turkey, Latin America, Vietnam, Europe, and China. And beat all of them. And while that, like, okay, beating Latin America and Turkey is whatever, that doesn't stop the fact that what is the point of Worlds? Right? What is the point of Worlds? Is it to celebrate just the best of League of Legends? Watch the Korean and Chinese League until, like, further notice. Maybe the European League. If we cared about what was the best of it all, then, like, the adage beforehand was that the actual Worlds was winter split in Korea because it happened after Worlds. and then that would solidify who was actually the best team. But like, since China has won a couple of them, that adage feels a little less accurate. But like, let's be kind of realistic here, right? The celebration here is not who is by far the best team, because even with the like surprise of DRX winning, they still came from a region who had the favorite to win the whole tournament. Two of them, in fact, right? The celebration is in the international matchups, of seeing multiple international matchups as much as possible. And play-ins with the removal of Turkey and the CIS and of what was the other region they removed? Oceania, especially Oceania being removed, means that like there were less international matchups that were going to get within play-ins. And on top of it, you reduce the amount of regions that they were going to face. They were never going to face like a Chinese team or a Korean team. In fact, there was less of a likelihood that they were going to face a North American team with the weird Worlds qualifying series. There is something that bothers me with how the spirit of international matchup is kind of snuffed for the lower seeded regions. And I wish that they had the chance to actually like play against some of these fantastic teams that they would usually never get the chance to do. I think that's just more of where my thought comes from on this situation. It just feels bad that they've removed consistently year after year more regions, and that they've removed a format that had the most amount of international matchups for something that feels like there's more stakes, but realistically has about similar stakes to what pre-2020 was. So those are my particular thoughts, given the combo of how play-in stages went, its fun, its disappointments, its expectations, as well as the Swiss stage and how we should be expecting it. Again, all of my play-ins thoughts, or all of my pick'ems thoughts are going to be there, as well as my stats that I used and collected will also be down below. And if you want to keep up to date to my expectations of, or my reviews of the different series and matches from Worlds and anything in between, will be also on the TikTok that I've linked in my description down below. With that, and without further ado, I would love to hear your thoughts. What was the most fun series for you in play-ins? Which particular matchup are you expecting within Swiss that really has you excited? Personally, not the first one that's happening, but the first one that was drawn, the one that really I'm excited for that's coming up is the Gen.G versus GAM. Oh, that's going to be fun. That and the JDG versus BDS. Those are the two winners of play-ins versus the top two like expected winners of whole Worlds. If BDS and GAM can really put on a show, oh man, that'll be so much fun. But yeah, I'd love to hear all and any of your thoughts in the comments down below. Thank you to everybody who has been watching. It's greatly appreciated. And I'll see you next week for once the first half of Swiss stage is done.